you lacrosse players out there, we are in post-holiday vacation. You've returned back to school, and you are closing in on your spring lacrosse season. You are between 6 and 8 weeks away from tryouts or the start of practices and ramping up your body of work that's going to be done on the field. How do we change our training program, both on the field and in the weight room, to maximize your what we call late off-season preparation? So, as you know, lacrosse has many different components that need to be trained, and they all are interwoven with the stimulus that we give our bodies, both in the weight room, in practice, and out on the field, training speed, change of direction, conditioning, etc. And these things need to be interrelated, and some thought needs to be put behind it. So we're not going into the well every day and overtraining before the time of the year where your body's actually going to be asked to do more when you do start ramping up your volume of practices and gameplay. So what changes now? What changes from fall or early winter and earlier in off season with the different modalities that you're working on and the different intensities and volume? So we're going to dive into three specific areas in our discussion today so you can maximize the last phase of your off season and dominate your tryouts and start your spring season healthy and firing on all cylinders. All right, one critical area that we don't always think about with progressions related to lacrosse is the demand that's put on the core. Lacrosse obviously works multi-planar movement patterns, especially when passing and shooting. And as the volume of shooting increases when you're back on the field in the spring, that needs to be prepped for, or else a ton of stress is put on the core, both active tissue and passive tissues as well. And when I say that, I'm referring to muscles and ligaments as passive tissue, and even stress on bone, on vertebrae. So if we have an unstable core and posture that's not optimal, and we throw on transverse plane movement or rotational movement, and that stress with a big jump in volume and intensity, meaning like shot effort and velocity, we're really setting ourselves up for injuries. And those injuries can be acute, or they can be chronic stress over time that can lead to something like a pars fracture, which is a stress fracture in the spine that happens, unfortunately, all too often in our developing young athletes. So in a perfect world, when you reach the late off season with about a month or two to go, we should have already been working on a lot of core stabilization strategies. And when I say stabilization, I mean loads put on our bodies that we are resisting to hold optimal posture and positioning with our core. So we've learned how to use our anterior core, basically keeping a connection from our rib cage to our pelvis. Think of front planks where we're not moving, but we have that load of endurance with body weight over time. We're working on recruiting our deep stabilizers to make sure our spine is stable in these positions and planes and exercises. Other variations of this could be some slow leg movements in like a bent knee leg raise or leg lowering variation. Those obviously have a number of different progressions, but settings where we're putting stress on our bodies, but trying to keep our bodies as still and stable as possible as we learn to use those muscles. Progressions that work different planes of motion, or different muscles that operate in different planes of motion, like torsion control. Side planks and Palloff presses are two that are critical for lacrosse. So building up time with optimal form and posture is key for both of those exercises. By the time we get into this phase now where we're getting ready for season, we have a stick in hand with more frequency and probably longer duration, spending more time hopefully outside, shooting on goal, working on your bounce back. And what we're looking to do here is prep our body for that intensity and volume. And in order to do so, we need to now start working towards some core movement. So we need to work towards core rotation. We need to work towards higher velocity movement. So these can be done with progressions like plank to side plank roll, or cable twists, or reverse wood chops or wood chops, and movements that are more specifically, imitating the patterns that you're in as you're shooting. Progressions of those adding velocity, we're trying to add actual power, which is going to be total body involved, but with a big emphasis on connecting our lower body power to the ground through our torso and to our hands into our stick ultimately. Now it goes right through our core. So medicine ball rotational throws should start to be implemented now. And we want to, again, get the body tuned up with coordination with our rotational patterns, but also more demand of stress with intensity through that rotational movement. So when stick is in hand and we're shooting, we're already prepped for it. We've been building our intensity, been building our velocity, and we're getting our tissue adaptations, and we're also getting our efficiency with the timing of firing hip and leg musculature to then core to then upper body, and that chain of events that happens when we shoot. Make sure we get this transitional phase in, and then we decrease risk of injury, we increase shot speed and accuracy, and you're going to have a successful spring. Check it out, implement, and circle back with us. Let us know how it goes. All right, so we are again 6 to 8 weeks out from our tryouts and from our season start, and we're talking about how we modify our training plan to get ready for spring lacrosse season. So one big category that everybody gets nervous about 3 weeks prior to tryouts is conditioning. We're all prepping for either the demand of the sport or your coach has a specific run test that scares you to death, and we're trying to do some last minute cramming. In a perfect world by now, what you've done is you've built a cardiovascular endurance base. So depending upon position, especially you middies, we've built that endurance in early off season to where we can set ourselves up for more volume of high intensity work, and we have better recovery in between our intervals. So assuming that's happened and we've gotten some runs in, 2 to 4 days a week, built up a little bit of mileage easy, and we've done some early off season, sprint mechanics and speed work with full recovery. We've done kind of a program that's been polarized, and now what we're trying to do is blend the two a little bit. So interval work, we can look at two different adaptations that we're looking to do. One, we want to get our high-end aerobic system tuned up, and that's done with tempo runs or threshold intervals, and that allows us to tolerate the buildup of the byproducts of high-intensity exercise. So this is, hydrogen ions that gives you that muscular burn. We used to call it like the lactate or lactic acid burn, which we know it's not from that now, but that's the concept. So those runs are done, 1, maybe 2 days a week, and you have intervals that last, 4 to 10 minutes and short rest periods in between, which just allows us to briefly recover and get right back to that like 7 to 8 out of 10 intensity run. This would be like a pace that you could do for 30 to 45 minutes at an all-out race pace. And we're building up volume of those intervals, not actual speed, but just the volume that you're doing. A tempo run would be something like a mile warm-up, a 2 miles at again, 7 to 8 out of 10 intensity, and then a cool down. So integrating those into our regimen is critical at this kind of late off season if you haven't already done so. And then the next piece we want to do is focus on our anaerobic battery. So think of our anaerobic capacity is that battery that's the high end efforts, the 90 seconds and less intensity. So that's where, we have a couple transitions with turnovers, or we're up and down the field and we're pushing our bodies, as hard as we can tolerate, but we still need to be able to last somewhere between 30 and 90 seconds of effort, or really high intensity effort with very short, breaks where maybe you're off ball defensively and you just catch your breath for 3 to 5 seconds and then right back into harder movement. That anaerobic battery really needs to be tuned up or focused on right now. It takes about 6 weeks to get a big return on investment there. And that's where we're starting with our repeated sprints. So instead of our like full recovery, all out effort, 20s, 40s, 60s, 100s, and we catch our breath completely. Now what we're doing is we're We're not going to be able to run as fast, so we're running at maybe 90 to 95%, but we're shortening the rest period in between. So instead of like a 1 on, 5 off work to rest ratio, now this becomes like a 1 to 3 and a 1 to 2. So we're really bringing that rest period down. And that could be something like, you know, 8 by 30 yards on, and having a 15 to 20-second recovery. So you're just trying to stay on the gas, and build that effort level further into, your repetition range of your sprints. That can also look like, 6 to 10 100ths for you full field athletes. That's an important piece to train, not just for the anaerobic battery and the conditioning piece, but also just to get the musculature used to running with that kind of volume and velocity with short breaks in between. We all know how sore our hips get when we first get out to full field practices. Now, another thing that we can do here to build that anaerobic battery is to hit some shuttles. Those could be 10, 20, 30s. Those could be 300-yard shuttles with, 25-yard increments or 50-yard increments. But that piece is kind of emptying that anaerobic battery. We take a rest period. We've, refilled about 75, 80%, and then we empty it again. And by building up the volume of those shuttles or sprint repeats that we're doing, about 2 days a week, you're really going to help enhance that anaerobic battery and get that ready for either your run test or the anaerobic demand that you have coming up. So make sure that's implemented along with your tempo and threshold runs, and you have maybe 1 or 2 low intensity, we'll call them active recovery days in your week, which puts us on the field a lot more than we were. So our weight room efforts also need to change a little bit. We'll talk about that on the next video. When we talk about on-field performance for a season start and being fully prepared, tissue adaptations are a huge piece, and this can come both with the weight room adaptation, the weight room stimulus, and out on the field. So we're going to tackle this one from a two-pronged approach. Number one, we're putting more demand on our body with on-field volume, whether that's volume of sprints, frequency of practices, or conditioning intensity. And if we're doing so, our body's not going to hold up if we're beating it down in the weight room with a high volume, lower to moderate intensity program. And what I mean by that is if we're doing, you know, 5 sets of 10 on a back squat and 3 sets of 12 on walking lunges and exercises like that with that kind of volume, we're going to be exhausted, we're going to be sore, and we're going to go into our on-field play the next day pretty beat up. So you're not going to be able to get the big stimulus that you're looking for the next day when you're looking to improve either your anaerobic battery through sprint repeats or shuttles, or you're working on your agility and footwork, and getting more specific with your, stick in hand, lacrosse specific intensities. You're just going to be beat up. So our weight room has to be modified. So this is where we make the transition from a hypertrophy program to a strength and power dominant program. So the phase that you're in, we're looking for a couple different changes here. We're looking for reduced overall volume or reps and sets. We're looking for an increase in intensity. So our meat and potatoes lifts, our squat, our trap bar deadlift, our Bulgarian split squats, those strength efforts have a reduction in rep range. So if you've been doing, 8 to 12 reps per set, we're now looking to drop those reps down into the 4s to 6s, depending upon exercise. And we're looking to increase load in order to get that strength adaptation. We also increase our rest period here to make sure that we're getting significant recovery between sets so we can really push the strength output versus, the fatigue response you'd be looking for to gain hypertrophy or muscle size. Number two, we're looking for an increase in power producing exercises. So that can come in the form of strength speed adaptations for our lifts. So, same lifts I just mentioned, back squat, trap bar deadlift, split stance, trap bar deadlift, things like that we can do with an emphasis on speed. So instead of using like a 6 rep max weight, we can drop that weight down to, a 12 to 15 rep max weight, but our goal is to move that weight explosively. So decelerate the weight down and accelerate as hard as you can in your concentric phase. So that's a strength speed adaptation, and we can have a day or multiple days that have those concepts in a program. Another big piece would be our plyos. So plyos are phenomenal for tissue adaptations that increase our just force output. So it shortens the amount of time we need to deliver force to the ground, which is great for change of direction, great for sprint top speed adaptations, great for tissue adaptations for strengthening the muscular tendinous piece of our chain that is at a high risk of injury if you do not prep this piece before you get out to practices and games. So this is a piece that needs to be integrated. This can look like, bounding, hops. We can do plyos with very short ground contact times, and we can do plyos that also have longer ground contact times for max exertion. All right, and you'll see some videos here that we're playing to show demos of those. Final piece of this is the on-field tissue prep. So this is where we want our agility training, our change of direction training to get way more sport specific. So instead of, generic drills like setting up some cones and running a pro agility drill or a specific pattern that you've been training, now what we're doing is we're adding reactions. We're also adding specific movements to your position. Like, what are you going to see on the field? Are you going to see specific opportunities to dodge? Are you going to be isolated, somebody dodging on you in open field? Are you going to be working from X? Like, put yourself in those specific positions and rep your footwork, rep your agility, your change of direction in those settings, and progress those to reacting. And that's, somebody giving you hand signals, that's reacting to a verbal command, that's reacting to one-on-ones or two-on-ones or ball movement. These drills are going to blend your, I don't want to say generic, but your more basic footwork and change of direction drills into on-field play and performance at a high level. And this is the time to do it. So as we have that increased demand again on the field, doing an increased volume of agility, change of direction footwork, we want to make sure that we reduce those high volume demands in the weight room so we can adapt with our footwork, with our change of direction, with our increased velocity, and we can really get our bodies ready for the demand that we're going to have in practice. So make those changes, both weight room and on field, and your body's going to be ready to dominate come this spring.